Okay, I want you to turn this algorithm into a flowchart. Pause the video, give it a go yourself first. Okay, so let's start off with, we have start. A school divides students into house groups based on the month that they were born in: January, February, March, and April. Put to Edward, May, June, July, March, turn everyone else to Trent. Okay, so we're going to ask the user to input their month. So I'm going to do input number month. Input num month. We're now going to decide which house they're in. So I'm going to use an if statement. Now, the way we're going to do this if statement, we can actually have several if statements. Let's first of all check to see if it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, is num month greater than 0 and less than 5? So that's basically saying 1 to 4. You could do it a different way by saying, is it 1, or is it 2, or is it 3, or is it 4? If yes, we're going to do something. If no, we're now going to check to see if it's 5, 6, 7, or 8. So we're going to do another if. Is num month greater than 4 and less than 9? So we can have no and a yes. Otherwise, they're going to be put into Trent house. So I'm going to do an assignment of house for a variable equals Trent house. If they're in 5, 6, 7, or 8, then Marchington house. So this should be house equals Marchington. And if they're in 1, 2, 3, 4, then Needwood house. House equals Needwood house. Okay. We need to then output the house they're in and keep a running total of each one. Okay, so it's output and running total. I'm going to do running total first. So we're going to have a variable called Trent house. So I'm going to do Trent. So the amount of people in Trent house equals whatever we've got in Trent plus 1. I actually cannot read my own handwriting here, so what house is the next one? It is Marchington. So I'm just going to call it March. I'm going to do March plus 1. And Needham need equals need plus 1. Cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assign these to be 0, because there might be a situation where we have no Trent house, or we might have a situation with no Needham house. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a box. I'm going to do need for Needham, Trent for Trent, and March for the March house. I'm going to set them all to be 0 to begin with. So I can do it like that. I can combine them all into one box. Okay. We then need to display the house. What I'm going to do is all of them need to be displayed. So if they're in Needham, it needs to be displayed. If they're in March, it needs to be displayed. If they're in Trentham, whatever it's called, it needs to be displayed. So they're all going to go to the same box, which is going to be output house. So depending on whatever they type in, so if they type in 1, they're in Needham House. Needham House goes up by 1, it's then going to display Needham House. If they type in 5, they're in Marchington House. So it's going to output Marchington House. If they type in 11, it's going to be Trentham House. It's going to output. So they all get outputted. And what we're going to do now is repeat this process for 20 students. So what we need is a count. So I'm going to make a count. So if I was doing this in real life, I'd use a pencil, because I'm going to make some changes. So we want that to be there. And I'm going to make another box called student count. Or I'm just going to call it count. Obviously, it starts on 0. So we need a loop now. So it's also going to be a diamond. Excuse me. I've been doing really well today, no coughing. And all of a sudden, start coughing. Okay. Is count equal to 20? So are we now at 20? So we also need to have a count equals count plus 1 to make sure that we're keeping track of how many students. So they input a number for their month. That'll be 1 person, 2 people, 3. Once it gets to our 20th person, it's going to end. I think. Let me just double check. Does it end? Oh, no. Print out how many students are in each house. So, let's do that. So, is count equal 20? Yes. And then we're going to output. And in our output, we're going to output all the different variables which are counting. So, Trent, March, and Need. Trent, comma, March, Need. So that's going to output all our counts of how many kids are in each house. Then we're going to end. If we're not at 20 students yet, we're going to loop right back to input the next month. And there you go. Turn this code into a flowchart. So pause the video, give it a go. Alright, so let's get ready to rumble. First thing we're going to do is start. Next thing we need is num equals 7, so this is simply a process we're assigning to num 7. We're now going to do a loop, but I'm going to do the checking of a loop at the end. You could do it now, but I'm not. I'm going to do it at the end. But x equals 1. X is a variable. We're now going to output this. Oops, that's not output. Output x multiplied by num. Now we need x to, well, before we get x to go up by 1, we're going to check to see whether or not x is 7, because that's when we're stopping. It's going to loop until we get to 7. So, what the heck? We're going to do a decision. Is x equal to 7? So when we get to 7, we want to stop. If yes, we're going to end. Look, I'm labeling yes. If no, we're going to loop. But before we do, it's a for loop, so x needs to become 2. We've got next x. Remember, this is kind of like pseudocode we've got here. So that basically means x equals x plus 1. So we're going to count. And we're going to loop right back to here. This is what's being looped, this print x multiplied by num. And that is it. We are done. Turn the following into a flowchart for me. So pause the video, give it a go yourself first. Okay, so what you should have done is obviously have a start. The next thing you want to do is count how many numbers are positive and how many numbers are zero. So we need a variable to store how many zeros. We also need a variable to store how many positives. We now want to have a variable which is going to count how many times we've done this, because we need to do 1,000. So let's have count, and let's have count start at 1. And we're going to then input our first number. Input our first number. Now we want to check to see whether or not the number is positive or negative. Well, not negative, positive or 0. So we're going to have our first decision. Is num greater than 0? We're going to have yes, and we're going to have no. If it is, we want positive to go up by 1. So pos equals pos plus 1. If it's not, we need to check to see, is the number 0? Is num equal to 0? And we're going to have a yes, and we're going to have a no. If yes, 0 equals 0 plus 1. If no, nothing actually happens, so we don't actually need, well actually we still do need a no, I suppose, because we want now count to go up by 1, and we want to check to see whether or not we're at 1,000. So let's do our loop. So we have a loop here. Is count equal to 1,000? So let's have this no, go into the loop. Let's have this, go to the loop. Let's have this, go to our loop. Our loop is count equal to 1,000. Let's do yes, it's 1,000. Does it need us to display? Yeah, so output results. So we do need to, at the end, after the loop, output. That's not output. Use an output box. Output the amount of zeros we've got. I really should put this into a sentence. So let me show you how to do it as a sentence for this one. And we also need to output the amount of positives. So output the amount in speech marks of positive numbers and then pos, comma, pos, and this needs to be outside of speech marks because it's a variable. End. Otherwise, if we're not at 1,000 yet, we want count to go up by 1. and then we want to loop back to input the next number. So if I was to zoom right out, this would be our flowchart. I need to label this as yes. There you go. So right now, we have an input 1,000 numbers, count how many numbers are positive and how many numbers are zero, then output the results. Okay, so this is expecting you to draw a flowchart for this following algorithm. So pause the video, give it a go yourself first. Alright, so as always, we need our start. We want to store how many people have been rejected because we need to display it. So I'm going to have a variable called reject. It's going to be 0 to begin with. We also need to keep track of how many children have been allowed on the right because it starts when we get 8. So I'm going to call this allowed. We're now going to enter in the first child's height, so input height. We're now going to check the height. Is height greater than 1.2? If it's greater than 1.2, greater than or equal to 1.2. We're going to have yes, we're going to have no. So let's deal with yes, the 1.2. What we're going to have is our allowed to go up by 1. If no, what we're going to do is have our reject go up by 1. Now, if it's been allowed, what we want to do is see how many riders we've got because it stops when we get to 8. So, is allowed equal to 8? Are we at 8 riders yet? And again, we're going to have a yes, and we're going to have a no. In fact, let's do this as yes. Let's have this as no. If we're not, we're going to loop right back to input our next person because we're not at 8 riders yet. When we reject, we also want to loop back to input the next height. Eventually, the last thing we want to do is display the amount of riders rejected. So that's easy. Once we've got 8 people, we need to see how many people have been rejected. And we're going to output and the reject. I could put this into a sentence like speech marks, the amount of riders rejected is speech marks close. Let me just give it this. And then comma, reject the variable. And end. So, if I was to zoom out, this would be our flowchart.